Well, welcome everyone. I'm so excited today. Clara Parks is, kind of a new the new age of knitting with the start of Knitters Review, which I think really launched the whole knitting community on the internet in a way that hadn't been done before or that hasn't been done since, and also is a very accomplished and semi-prolific writer, on top of running one of the most popular knitting websites in the world. So I think, first of all, you're obviously a busy woman, Clara. So, and I know you're on this like crazy book tour, as starting this crazy book tour in support of this book as well. You're going to be all
Yeah,
over the country.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, which is not something we see a lot in the knitting community. But this is a little different. This isn't a pattern book like most of our authors who've been here, we talk about the patterns and the
hmm
projects and how difficult they are and any new skills that people need to learn. And we're going to have a very different experience today. And while I was preparing some screens for today, and I did a Google search to find you on the web, and obviously I already knew about Knitters Review, but you are just the social media queen, and I'll say because we have Planet Pearl as a Facebook page, and that's enough work for me. So I'm really in awe. And we're going to show people where all the places that they can find you, which is pretty crazy. And I imagine some days you have
Yeah.
a hard time finding yourself.
I keep that very separate. I keep
I
her in a little basket right by my side. Yeah.
Yes, it's really amazing. For those who
Mm.
haven't been to Knitters Review, which maybe there's two or three on the planet,
Mm.
tell us about how that got started, because it's really an amazing thing, and like most amazing things, I assume it started small.
Thank you. Yeah, it started very small. There was no formal business plan. It wasn't no focus groups or anything like that. It was really um, there were two sides to it. One of them was kind of the professional side that I was with a team and we were all about to be laid off and we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we take what we've been doing here and apply it to something else that for me it was something that matters a lot more. I mean, nothing, and not that like database technology and software development and printer quality isn't interesting, but it wasn't where my heart is. But the other part of it was this is way back in 2000, if you can remember that far. We were just starting to see online yarn stores crop up. I mean, like late 90s, I placed my first couple of online orders. But I remember even like with webs, you could order their box with a sampler of all the different yarns, and then you would like mail in your order with a check or a credit card. But you had a chance to touch the yarns before you ordered them. And then suddenly we were having all these great websites offering up yarns that we'd never seen before. We'd never touched before. They weren't in our local yarn store. So I was doing my patriotic duty of
We
ordering,
appreciate that.
hey, it's the least I could do, really. Ordering tons, of course, and
Oh.
what I would receive more often than not didn't match what my expectations were. And that really intrigued me, that mismatch between what I saw online, what I was able to decipher from the product details and the description, which was always like this wonderful, 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 perfect, wonderful. There was no critical discussion in there. How could there be such a disconnect between that and the product? And so I've always been really curious about yarn more than I guess in a potentially slightly abnormal way. Like we all love yarn,
How
but
abnormal is that?
well, it's like for me, it's yeah, there's nothing abnormal about it. You are perfect and wonderful.
Thank you.
But just my question, the first question for me is always, what yarn is that? Not what pattern or what designer or what are you going to make, but ooh, what is that yarn? And I mean, that was my first attraction to yarn when I saw it in my grandma's knitting basket. Was like, how do you make that work? Because I wanna animate that. I like that material. And so I launched Knitter's Review with the intent of every week, for 12 years it was weekly, I would go out into the world and try to find interesting, unusual, noteworthy, new, sometimes not new, yarns, and then also tools and books and materials and even events, things that kind of collectively shape our knitting experience. And I would write about them from a really honest, unbiased perspective, that I am not an employee of a yarn company. I don't own a yarn store. I have no vested interest in you buying this product. I just want to help you become a more educated and, in a way, confident knitter. So then when you go into the yarn store and you pick up, oh, never far from here, like you go to a yarn store and you pick up a skein of yarn, you can feel confident in what you want to do with it, not so cautious and afraid to kind of go off road and not use what the pattern recommends. So that's the Cliff's Notes version of how I got here, I guess.
So, and how has Knitter's Review changed over the years? I mean, because obviously the even just what's available to knitters, which
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I guess I've been back knitting now for about 6 years, and even just in that 6 years, what's available has expanded so dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine like picking and choosing what you're going to talk about or review, or I mean, it's just there's so much. How do you whittle it down?
You know what's interesting? There really is so much. What's different is that now there are a lot of other places to peel away the peripheral discussion so that I don't have to have it, and I can actually be pickier in what I do choose, because I know so many other bases have been covered for me, if that makes sense.
No,
And so,
absolutely.
and also in a way, like hand dyers, that's a really hard one to write about because a lot of them are using the same bases. And so what you are writing about is not the yarn, the material itself, but someone's color aesthetic. And that's a difficult one. I don't feel comfortable reviewing, how do you, well, she uses muted tones and I don't like muted tones. It
Yeah, it's
becomes
so
much more,
personal.
yeah,
It's a personal choice thing. So,
yeah, as it should be, as it really
yes.
should be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because I guess because truly there's no such thing as ugly color because someone's going to love it or that person wouldn't
yep,
have made it.
exactly.
So you might
Hmm.
think it's ugly, but somebody's going to buy it. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing. So now and then this is not your first book. This is not your first trip to the bookstore. And
Hmm.
for those, and actually it was funny. I actually have a couple of these in my library, and it didn't click in my head when I got my advanced copy of Yarn Whisperer that this was actually the same person because these books are it's I mean they just seem like a natural outcropping of Knitter's Review and where you started to where, and we'll talk about the new book, and I'm really excited you're going to do a little reading from the book for us. So how did you get started with your other books, the Book of Wool, the Book of Socks, the
Hmm.
Book of Yarn?
Well, the first book was the Knitter's Book of Yarn, and that started out of my timidity in approaching people to teach at the Knitter's Review retreat, which I've had now. I think this is the 13th year. Actually, maybe it's
Wow.
only the 12th year. But when it got started, I was just very timid about asking people, and from an apologetic standpoint, almost. That's very much changed now, I'm happy to say. But so I thought, well, surely I should be able to teach something. Well, I can't, I'm not nearly as good to teach about. And I thought, well, yarn. Actually, I could teach a class about yarn. And I sat down and wrote an outline for a class, and and then I taught the class, and it went really well. And then I think 2 weeks later, maybe not even, I got a call. It was right around that time I got a call from the editorial director of a new startup at Random House called Potter Craft. She said, I'm sure you've been approached by other publishers in the past, but, and I'm sure you're under contract with other people, but if you're not, would you be interested? And what would you like to write? And I said, well, I have this idea. Here's the idea. And she said, sold, let's do it. So it was
Wow.
beautiful synchronicity, and the book follows almost exactly the format of the class. And it really is just my love letter to yarn and everything that I have learned about it in my journey so far, in terms of how it's made, how the different fibers behave, just helping you avoid kind of common pitfalls in matching yarn to stitch and to project. So that was
Well,
book number one.
you have probably squeezed and swatched more yarn than anyone on the planet. So
Mm,
that
yeah.
seems like a really good fit. And then the book of socks and the book of wool. What inspired
Mhm.
those?
Well, those the second one was the Knitter's Book of Wool, and it was fun. They were hesitant to do that one because they didn't quite think wool was a big enough topic, which I can laugh about now. I mean, it's a valid
Do they
concern.
not
They,
knit? Yeah,
but
yeah.
they know stuff that I don't, and you can joke about it, and of course I've joked about it, but there's a reason that there's the business side and the creative side. But so the reason the Knitter's Book of Wool came about is because just as much as I mean, there's so much incredible variety even in the word wool. It's like using the word flower. It's just the beginning of describing from a plant variety what is on your needles. And there's so much nuance and depth and variety. And it's the history of humans on this planet. Sheep were one of the first animals that we domesticated. So they've been with us since the very, very beginning. And their fiber has so much nuance depending on the geography, the climate, the altitude, their diet, the conditions in which they were raised. And as humans moved, so did the sheep move. So it's just, for me, it's a tremendously fascinating topic. And it's the history of humans on Earth. It's a geopolitical history, it's an economic history, but it's also from a knitting perspective. You could sample a different breed or a different blend every day and have a completely nuanced, unusual feeling in your fingers and on the needles and in the fabric. And how cool is that?
Well,
So,
I just like the idea of sampling a new yarn every day. that
yeah,
that in and of itself,
yeah,
that in and of
yeah.
itself. So,
Mm-hmm.
because I think probably the second coolest job in the world is actually the yarn editors at the big publishing houses who get yarn by the crate every day, which just even thinking about it. So, it's,
What's tricky is that they come in single skeins. That's like I have a two-story space in my barn, which is supposedly my office, but I always end up here in the kitchen, and it's filled with single skeins, like an archive of the last 13 years of the knitting world, but they're all single skeins.
oh
So
my,
it's, yeah.
yeah, be still my beating heart.
Mm.
So, and then socks was really kind of the first, was a little bit of a departure in that it actually was, you know, like patterns and designs. And so why socks, other than you live someplace where there's a barn, so you probably wear socks.
Well, I was interested. The first book actually had 40 patterns, which if you're a knitter and someone approaches you and says, "I want you to do a book with 40 patterns," tell them no. That's my
No,
advice to you.
no.
It's not a reasonable. The previous books had patterns, but in this case, like I felt like I had started with the mechanics of yarn, right? Basic overview: fiber, twist, ply, construction. Then I went into the nuance of the fiber, all the different staple lengths and luster and crimp and their behavior and their history. And with the third book, I wanted to talk about kind of the mechanics of yarn in terms of its breaking point. And the best place to study that is in socks because they receive the most stress of any garment that you could knit. And I started to look at it. It was actually for a class for the first sock summit. And I'll admit I went into it thinking, well, I can't do my yarn class, so I'll do a sock class. And I started to read, and I found all these great old handbooks and textbooks for the textiles industry. And I discovered there's like a lot of science behind this, really, really interesting. And so that's where the Knitter's Book of Socks came from, was wanting to explore kind of the energy that holds knitted fabric together and how you can enhance that to have something that lasts a lot longer. And it was expressed through socks, which are adorable and fun and clever and little microcosms in each sock.
Yeah, they're little tiny canvases. Little
Yeah.
tiny canvases. So, and I know sock knitting is so popular, mostly because we all have feet. So,
We hope if we're
yeah,
lucky.
and they're very portable. You can stick them in your purse, which is while you're
Hmm.
when you're sitting at the doctor's office or whatever. So it's really
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
So, and then the yarn whisperer, which is a clear departure.
Hmm.
And so, tell me how the idea for this book came about.
Well, with this one, I always wanted to work with Melanie for a long, long time. She wrote the book Knitting in America. For those of you who haven't seen it, it got republished as America Knits, and that was a book in the mid '90s, late '90s that profiled. Melanie traveled across the country with a photographer, Chris Hartlove, and they profiled people who'd managed to find their way some realm within knitting, whether it was designing, manufacturing yarn, dyeing yarn. Um, I'm getting audio feedback. Is that okay?
Yeah, and actually, I did for a second, but it seems to
Okay.
have resolved.
Okay. I'll just listen to myself talk. Um, yeah, so she did this amazing book, and that was really the first time that I saw other people living a path that I longed to be in. And so that was like my Bible for years and years and years. And then I got to meet Melanie, and we became friends. And for several years, we wanted to work together, but the timing wasn't right. And finally, the timing was right, and she was up to something different, or up for something different. She was willing to go beyond twist and ply and individual patterns and the knitter's book of, and look at something a bit deeper.
So now this is a collection of essays.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be accurate? Essays
Yeah.
about knitting and knitters and the life of a person who spends their time squeezing and squeezing and watching. So now
Mm-hmm.
you're going to read a little excerpt from the book for us.
I am. And I'm gonna have to lean over and get the book. But this really, how the book began was as a study of stitches, because I'm really interested in the physicality and the mechanics of how we work them, how they impact our psyche as we work them, and I don't know, the mechanics of how they work. And so even the working title of the book for quite a bit at the beginning was Stitches. Not that that would have actually been the title, but that was. So this is the first essay that kind of prompted the whole exploration. And you're going to be looking at my grandma's china while I lean over to get the book. Put my earphones back on. Yeah, I totally have an echo, so I apologize if I'm a little weird.
Yeah, it's actually and it's not coming through on my end, so I don't hear it. So
Okay.
hopefully we're okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This one is called The Thing About Baubles. And I'll take off one earphone. There we go. My maternal grandma always wore turtlenecks. Not until late in life, after dementia took its toll, her long braids were lopped off and her Icelandic sweaters replaced by wash and wear polyester gowns, did I discover the reason why. Her upper chest and neck were peppered with a faint, fleshy constellation of skin tags. According to my mother, my ever-tactful grandfather felt compelled to snort at some point in the summer of 1957, "Ruth, put on a turtleneck. Those things are disgusting." From that moment on, she never left the house uncovered again. I can find no photos of her ever sporting a bathing suit, shorts, or even a short-sleeved shirt. When she came to visit us in Arizona and the temperatures hovered around 100 degrees, the turtleneck was still firmly in place, sleeves marching defensively to her tiny wrists. It was her version of a burqa, protecting a Victorian modesty that concealed a painfully fragile ego. According to family lore, she even changed into her pajamas in the closet. It's true. How funny then that at the same time my grandma was so carefully covering up her neck, she was furiously adding baubles to everything she knit, like a chef gone wild with a pastry bag. Using a seemingly endless supply of off-white worsted-weight wool procured who knows where, she adorned pillow cover after pillow cover with complex Aran patterning that featured always a proliferation of baubles. Baubles are the skin tags of knitted fabric. Wobbly nubbins that protrude and dangle, make babies hungry, invite fiddling, distract the eye, and consume acres of yarn. While skin tags may appear suddenly and when least expected, baubles exist only when we want them to exist. A bauble is formed by adding several stitches onto an unsuspecting stitch, working them back and forth independently from the rest of the fabric, and then binding off all but that original stitch, which then rejoins the party as if nothing had happened, only now sporting a giant hump on its back. Who, me? Oh, must have been that second piece of cake. It laughs nervously as it inches into the crowd. A bauble is a whispered conversation that everyone overhears, a prominent sidebar, a weekend in Las Vegas caught on tape. As with any protruding three-dimensional object, we've developed all sorts of techniques to make a better, firmer, tighter bauble. We've learned that if you add and bind off the extra stitches in stages, row by row, you create a rounder, more robust bauble. We've discovered that if we wrap the neighboring stitches as we go along, we can give greater support to full-figured baubles. We found that if we work our baubles too close together, we'll end up with an unattractive unibauble. That it's far wiser to lift and separate our baubles with plenty of stockinette stitches. Saggy baubles? Try twisting the stitch in the row directly above the one in which you added the bauble. As much as I'd like to say that bauble beauty is in the eye of the creator, it's also in the eye of the beholder, and nothing beats the awkwardness of two ill-placed baubles on a grown-up woman's sweater.
Oh no.
Far better to place them evenly throughout your work. But be careful. Adding baubles with reckless abandon can be dangerous, because there's no getting rid of a bauble once it's there. You can add new ones after the fact, no problem, but you can't freeze one off a sweater, cover it with a Band-Aid, and expect it to heal. Slice a bauble off your fabric, and the surrounding stitches will quickly open into an ever-widening yawn. A bauble is there to stay till death do you part. Many knitters scorn baubles, with the same disdain reserved for a neighbor's barking dog or the one lumbering Winnebago that refuses to pull out of the passing lane. They're fiddly and tedious to work, always hitting the pause button when you've just begun to gain momentum. To knit a sweater with baubles is to tour a museum with a friend, you know the one, who insists on stopping at each painting and reading the information card word by word. There you stand in the doorway, eager to move into the Impressionist room, while she lingers among the pre-Raphaelites, still reading the second paragraph of the third card on the fourth painting. Even the word bauble doesn't bode well. It means to make a mess of something, to mishandle it. Like when a horse makes a misstep before a race, it's called a bobble. Likewise, an athlete bobbles when fumbling the ball. To bobble is to lose one's grip, which is what many people think you've done when you start adding baubles to everything. I certainly thought so. I suspect bauble mania is especially likely to afflict those people made uncomfortable by bare walls and unadorned space. For them, a sea of stockinette is like an empty windowsill with nary a seashell or figurine to keep it company. Their immediate instinct is to put something on it, and baubles are the knitter's favorite figurine. They adorn and punctuate the three-dimensional language of stitches. They are the smack of a dot at the bottom of an exclamation point, or a wad of chewing gum on the sidewalk, a fibery tumor. I was rather indifferent to baubles until the day I spotted the jacket. Knit in bulky yarn, it had a shockingly deep collar of baubles, matched by an equally substantial swath along both cuffs, in a charmingly 1960s Jackie O style. I was mesmerized. These baubles were not discreet or subtle. They were loud, proud Dolly Parton baubles, stomping their feet on every available inch of fabric. They created a honeycomb of stitches, filled with a plush, fibery sweetness I found simply irresistible. Suddenly, and against all my better judgment, I felt a desire stir deep within my knitting loins, a desire to cast on and create this coat for my very own self. Could I, I am knitting this veritable bauble-palooza. Transform an eyesore into an attraction? Could I make peace with baubles? I had to try. The recommended yardage alone told me I was in for a long trip. You'd normally need about 840 yards to complete a comparably sized and shaped coat, and that's using a thick, bulky yarn. But this baby was asking for 1,200 yards, maybe even more. I ordered 1,400 yards of a plush, full-bodied wool yarn, figuring I could always use the extra for a matching bobbled hat and mitts when in Rome. I cast on at the bottom and worked my way up. The pattern has you add raglan-style sleeve shaping, and then, only at the very top it all off with a heaping helping of baubles. Progress on the body was fast as my needles cranked out sheets of bulky stockinette, just as I caught myself thinking I should have this done by the end of the weekend. I hit the baubles. They say that driving in Africa has two extremes. One minute you're speeding along on smooth, new tarmac, and the next minute the pavement ends and you're dodging potholes big enough to swallow a Jeep. Well, after cruising along in my smooth stockinette, I was now in first gear, wondering if I'd make it to the next town by sunset. And then something happened. A switch in my impatient brain clicked off. I stopped focusing on time and speed. I stopped anticipating the next row and the row after that. I settled into the deeper, slower pleasure of the moment and of each stitch. I savored the experience of watching that rounded shape begin and grow and finally mature into a full-bodied bauble. I became excited when it was time to bring each new bauble home to meet the family. I loved watching how the other stitches adjusted to the newcomer, and I felt almost giddy as the slow, steady body of baubles unfolded on my needles. I felt a sense of solidarity with my grandma, with all those bauble knitters who'd come before me. They'd stumbled upon this secret and guarded it so well. They'd endured the sneers and eye rolls of anti-bobblers, blithely continuing on their merry way. Now I understood. I love my bauble coat more than just about anything else I've ever knit. I'm not sure it's the most flattering of garments. It's not. But when I wear it, I can quickly spot the bauble haters in the crowd and connect with the bauble sisterhood and brotherhood, those who know the secret. I love how the collar feels, and I love how it adorns and protects a neck that is beginning to sprout its own far smaller constellation of skin tags. Speaking of which, last week I went to the dermatologist for my annual checkup. She looked at my freckles, she measured the creepy mole on my back, and then she glanced at my neck. "We can freeze these off if they ever start to bother you," she said. I considered it for a moment. I thought of my grandma and her turtlenecks, and of how readily she could have had her own skin tags removed. Yet she didn't. "You know what?" I replied. "I'm good, thanks."
Thank you, thank you, Clara. And I'm a bauble girl too, so yes, I love baubles. Once I learned how to do, and it does require some restraint when you're designing a fabric. If you really love baubles, not to just put them on everything. So
that's so tempting.
It is tempting. You know, there's something about the three-dimensional, bauble thing that's just I don't know. It's entrancing. I can't stop. So yeah. So so you're getting applause from the people in the room, which yes, thank you so much for doing a reading, because I saw your schedule for your book tour and all the readings you were doing, and I thought, well, crap, what if you live too far away? I wanted a book reading, so thank you so much for humoring me, and everyone in the room really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
And speaking of being everywhere, there are a lot of places people can go to keep up with you. So in one is your blog, Clara's Window, right, where people can log in and keep track of you. And Susan wants to know, will you be doing a reading at Rhinebeck at the Fiber Festival?
I will be in the book signing area Saturday and Sunday.
Well,
Yes.
there you go, Susan. If you're headed there, if you're headed to Rhinebeck, you lucky dog, then
Oh, please do. Please. I'd love to see you, Susan.
yeah. So yeah, so you can see
Okay.
live, not just here in the party line. So Victoria wants to know if you're headed to Maine.
I will be in Portland, Longfellow Books on October 24th.
There you go. So you'll be
Any
everywhere,
other
everywhere.
questions?
So, and then
Oh,
this is a little crazy. This is actually my husband's worst nightmare, is that I either buy sheep, start spinning, or start dyeing wool
it's
because
inevitable.
I it takes up enough space in my house already, or so he thinks. So, well, and I'll admit he's right. It's actually in two houses now. It just it keeps growing. So so tell us about this project, because I think this is so funny.
This has been unbelievably fantastic. This was so along my journey, I've come in contact with a lot of people who are involved in the making of yarn, right? And they know that I write about it, and so they send me their yarn, and they want, so what do you think? And it was at Rhinebeck several years ago. I met a guy named Eugene Wyatt, and he has one of the largest, if not the largest, flocks of purebred Saxon Merino sheep in the United States. And um, for me, part of my quest, like my kryptonite, is when I find someone who has a supply of fiber, because that's kind of the weak point in the chain, is enough of the really good stuff to be able to make a lot of yarn. Um, and so as soon as Eugene told me that, I went weak at the knees. You are my new best friend. And so we became professional friends, and I really respect what he does with his fiber, and he respects what I do with words. And so over the years, I've kind of told him, I've dabbled with the idea of trying to make my own yarn. And a couple of yarn companies have approached me, but it was never, I'm a total control freak with extremely high uh, criteria for, it was not going to work. And so he knew this. And a while ago, he emailed me about this and that, and our latest shearing is out, and good micron count. And by the way, I have this bale. I have a 676-pound bale, scoured. It's in Texas. Right now, it's more than I need. Dot dot dot.
Oh my gosh.
And by the end of the week, I'd already, you know how it is. At first, I thought, what on earth do I need? How big is my stash? How much fiber do I have? And then I thought, wait, this is a much, much bigger opportunity. We could actually, this is enough that we could do stuff with it. And
Yeah.
I
So
don't
how
need
long
all
did it
that
take you
money.
to talk yourself into this?
Oh, he emailed in April, and I didn't pull the trigger on it until November.
Oh my gosh, you have more self control than I do.
Well, I knew it was going to be a really deep rabbit hole, and I just wanted to make sure, like, are you ready to do this? Um, and so I did. So I opened it up in January, and what it is, I wanted to share the yarn with people because it's far more than I could possibly use. And I made a promise to everybody, those people who subscribe, that I would be completely honest about every step of this journey. And the biggest mistakes, fine, I'll be right out there. What the fears are, what I see, I would just convey it to everybody. And they could go along with me, traveling to the scouring plant, going to see Eugene's flock on shearing day. We would go to the different mills, meet the people, look at the equipment, and see what it really takes and what is still available to make yarn in the United States, and who's doing it, and what are the weak links, what are the vulnerabilities, and just start to help people thinking about what can we do to revitalize an industry that I think is really crucial in this country. Just the same concerns that we have about where our food comes from. I feel like once you lose the ability to clothe yourself, it's a really kind of a weird place you get yourself into. If you can't feed and clothe yourself, you've separated from humanity a bit much. So So that's what the great white bale is. In theory, it was going to be 6 months. I thought, no problem. I can make four completely different yarns at four different mills. No problem. It's easy.
Ah,
But we got kind of waylaid with the fourth one. So I'm looking at hopefully we will come to a natural conclusion in November. But I'm not going to stop it until the story is done. So we're just keeping going, and people are really great about it. So
well,
that's
so
what it is.
people can check in here and follow your yarn making journey, which is just it's amazing. What a project! So, and then also for those who are on Ravelry, you can also find Clara has a designer page and pattern store on Ravelry where you can get your own little bit of Clara for your personal knitting pleasure. And because Clara is in fact everywhere, you can find her on Facebook and you can find her on Twitter. And actually I think you're a pretty active tweeter, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not. I don't do the like, had beans for dinner.
Yeah.
But
Well,
but
and
I enjoy the dialogue with people.
yeah, and I think that's kind of a problem. I don't check Twitter a lot because I'm not all that interested in what people are eating for dinner. But
Yeah,
unless it's a chef that I'm following, then I really do care what they're eating
yeah.
for dinner. But otherwise, and I have Susan has a question. She said, "What is a butter wrangler?"
Baker. I love, love, love to bake, and I have no fear taking out a pound of butter and letting it soften, and then pounding it into submission and making croissant or cake or caramels out of it.
Oh,
That's my definition of a butter wrangler.
there you have it. Yeah, Susan said she loves butter. Well, and I live in the South, which is kind of it's the four major food groups: butter, brown sugar, bourbon, and pecans. So
Oh,
that's what we live on down here. So
okay. I could live down there.
that's what I know. It's pralines right there. So and then you can also check out Clara on Pinterest, which I love that so many designers and people in the arts are using Pinterest to share their inspirations, which is it's also great if you're remodeling your house and you're trying to keep track of stuff. But it's a great place to go and check out your favorite designers and find out what they're inspired by, which I find to be a fascinating process to see that.
Mm,
So you can check that out. Susan says that you have a wonderful life that you're living. I think we would
I'm
all
trying.
I
Thank you,
think we would all
Susan.
agree with that.
Mm.
So what's up next? You got the big book tour coming, and clearly you can't just be sitting around not writing something.
No, no. Um, I am in the very fortunate place of staring at what direction to go next in terms of the next book, and having open doors to have the luxury of being able to choose.
Oh,
So
how
I'm not quite
wonderful!
sure what direction. It's mostly where do I want to dedicate the next year or 2 years of my life. But we'll see. I'm kind of insufferable right now because I can't decide. Um, so slight problem there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the tour. I'm looking forward to the tour and getting out and talking to people and meeting people, and I feel like that's going to give me a lot more clarity about where we are going collectively as a group and where my personal spark is.
Well,
Um,
wonder. Oh, MLS says you should do a graphic novel. you know, I've never seen a graphic novel about knitting, so I think you would have that niche all to yourself there. So, but how funny is that? But yeah, everybody says this would be great. Yeah, a graphic novel about knitting. So,
I
you
have
know,
to beef up my drawing skills.
yeah. So, or you get an
And
illustrator to
mystery.
help. Yeah, but
That's true.
would be how much fun is that? So, and I mean, and with I guess it would have to graphic novels, which usually have superheroes in it. So, I think the knitting world needs a superhero or super heroine because we don't have one. Swimmers and divers have Aquaman, and I mean,
Mm.
you know, we need
Well,
someone.
we have Saint Elizabeth,
That's true.
but I don't know if well, she rode a motorcycle, so
I think there's something there. I think there's a little germ of an idea there. So it
Mhm.
would be fun. So
Mm.
so those who are lucky enough to be near your book signings, and is it posted on your blog? Is there a schedule there on your blog?
On the blog, good point. Hmm, I don't. It's on Knitters Review on the homepage. There
Okay.
should be a link along the left column, Clara's books, and if you keep scrolling, I think down below there's Clara on tour. Yep, on
Oh,
tour
there you go.
under the
So we can
more.
people who are lucky enough to live near one of these bookstores
Hmm.
that that they can come and actually see you in person and get their book signed and
Oh, please do. And I have an evening planned for them. Oh my goodness. I even have a little game, the audience participation that we're going to be playing. And the winners are going to receive a homemade, hand stirred, hand wrapped dark chocolate espresso caramel made by yours truly. So,
oh my gosh, so there's chocolate included.
oh
Oh
yeah.
my god. Okay, so run to the bookstore.
Yeah.
Run
I'll
to the
have 10
bookstore.
10 per signing, 10 per signing. Because
Oh,
my carry on bag is only so big. So,
oh. Well, unless somebody fixes you up with a kitchen and a locale there, that would be good.
oh, that'd be great.
But we need you to be doing other things other than just cooking chocolate. So, even
My
though
brother makes chocolate. The family has gotten deep into
oh,
this. It's kind of yeah, bean to bar. He actually roasts the beans and makes. So if this
uh,
knitting thing doesn't work out, I'm going to start a candy company. I think it's
well,
the only way.
they're both addictions, right? Knitting is an addiction. Yarn's an addiction. I don't want any help for mine. I'm okay with it. Chocolate can be addicting. So thank you for being our pusher.
It's not heroin. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've been.
Over
We
the
could have worse.
counter.
We could have worse. We could have worse addictions.
Okay.
So, but I really appreciate you taking time out. I know you have a really busy day today, so appreciate you taking time out to come and chat with us. And then people stay in the room. Don't leave yet because I'm going to give away a copy of the book.
Yay.
So, but thank you so much, Clara, for joining us. And I can't
Oh,
wait to
my
hear what's
pleasure.
up next for you. You have to come back and talk to us again.
I would love to. I really would. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.